This is a recording of how stress becomes distressing. Hopefully, by understanding the biology and the neurology of stress, you get an understanding of how stressful feelings arise and how, when we struggle and fight against these feelings, they become stronger and stronger. Imagine you were a primitive man living in a forest. You see a bear approaching you. Now, we are programmed to react almost automatically to possible signs of danger. So when we see the bear, a response is triggered in a part of our brain called the limbic system, in particular an area called the amygdala. Now, when this area is activated, we get the fear and anxiety response. Now, this is very automatic. There isn't a lot we can actually do about it. And when the amygdala gets triggered with the fear and anxiety response, not only do we start to feel anxiety and a bit fearful, it also triggers the sympathetic nervous system to stimulate the adrenal glands, which are located just above your two kidneys. And when the adrenals get stimulated, they release adrenaline. Now, this makes your heart start to beat a lot faster, and it also starts pumping blood to your muscles, and you get ready for action. Now, a really good response might be just to run away, get as far away as you possibly can from the bear, because the bear is a lot stronger than you. However, if that is not possible, you may have to resort to, rather than fleeing from the bear, you may have to start to, the adrenaline may start to pump into your blood system and get your heart beating. And you may decide that the next response is to actually fight the bear. So you may pick up some weapons and you may go and start to fight the bear and struggle with it. And as you're doing this, you start to, the amygdala will still start producing lots of fear and anxiety, and adrenals are pumping. And as you keep fighting, this cycle will carry on until you actually kill the bear or the bear runs off. Now, this is a very basic safety mechanism that is built into all of us, and it helps us in many different ways to survive even in the modern world. So we don't really want to switch this mechanism off. It's very useful in helping our survival to decide whether sometimes we should just run away from a dangerous situation, or sometimes we fight in a dangerous situation. However, if you look at, if we're not actually dealing with an actual real external threat, if we're just thinking in our bedroom somewhere or at work, and we just start thinking about a possible problem, we're wondering about what if something goes wrong with our job maybe, or at home we may be worrying about our children or something, then just having that worrying thought will still have a triggering effect on the amygdala, because the amygdala will recognize that thing as some possible danger. And then again, we would have a fear response where the amygdala will trigger some fear and anxiety, and this will trigger the adrenals to start producing a bit of adrenaline. And this gets our heart pumping, and muscles get activated with, enriched with blood, get ready for action. And because there isn't actually any real danger that is currently present in the external world, it's just something we're thinking about, imagining in our head, then we get enact what is called clean anxiety. The anxiety wave comes, it reaches a peak, and then it just slowly fades away. If we just leave it alone, However, if on the other hand we have a thought like, what if something goes wrong, and this triggers the amygdala start to produce some fear and anxiety, and this results in adrenaline being produced from the adrenal glands, which causes the heart to start pumping. Then, instead of having this like clean wave of anxiety, which it starts off, it reaches a peak, and then slowly fades away, if we start experiencing maybe slightly bigger waves of anxiety, like they get quite big, then what can happen is we start to struggle and resist the actual sensations and feelings that are being produced by this very natural biological response. So, if, for example, we start to notice that the adrenaline is being produced in the body, and we notice that our heart is starting to pump a bit, and it's maybe slightly higher than normal because we're worried about something very specifically that is causing a bit of concern, and the heart starts to pump a bit more, then there is an internal response where if we don't allow that, if we don't like the heart beating so much, we can start to say, oh, I've got to stop this, I don't like this heart beating very much. And what that actually does is it starts to what happens is the struggle with the pumping heart results in the amygdala thinking that the pumping heart is something dangerous because we're struggling to try and stop it. Now, this doesn't happen instantly, but it can happen over time. If you keep struggling with, say, body sensations and anxiety feelings that are a natural response to just worrying about things a little bit. But if we start to get a bit worked up too much about the actual symptoms of the fight or flight response, then what can happen is the amygdala starts to produce, it activate the sympathetic nervous system even more, and these red arrows indicate that we start to produce even more adrenaline gets produced in the system, and so what do you think happens to the heartbeat? It basically starts to get more and more. So because it's an internal response, it's an internal feeling we're having. We can't really kill it as if it was a bear because it's an internal thing, and we can't really run away from it as well because it's an internal thing. So if we keep struggling, say for example, just with the heartbeat, then the heartbeat starts to get stronger, and then again we might think, oh my god, I'm going to have a heart attack, and again that triggers the amygdala to think this is getting dangerous now, and so it starts to produce, it activates the sympathetic nervous system even more, and even more adrenaline is produced, and this increases the heartbeat even more. So we get into this kind of very vicious cycle which just goes round and round and round, and the heartbeat starts getting bigger and we worry about it even more, and that produces even more activation on the sympathetic nervous system, we get even more adrenaline, and it just keeps going until the adrenals get exhausted or something. Now the same thing happens with we may not be so worried about the actual heart beating, some of us are, if you're having a panic attack or something, but other people may get really worked up about the feelings of anxiety. And the same thing happens here. If we start feeling the anxiety and we start struggling and fighting and saying this is a terrible thing, I shouldn't be feeling anxious, etc., I must stop it, then again, over time, the amygdala starts to think that the anxiety is something that's a dangerous thing to our well-being, and it starts to activate this, and as soon as it gets activated, it produces even more anxiety, and this starts to produce more adrenaline in the system, which adrenaline also not only increases the heartbeat, but it also starts to make us even more anxious. And again, we get caught in this vicious spiral that the more we dislike, the more we resist and fight these anxiety feelings, then the more activation of the amygdala and the limbic system, it produces even more fear and anxiety, and we keep going into this other loop, which just goes round and round. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, ACT calls this red loop, it calls it dirty anxiety. And so we start off with the blue loop, which is just basically this blue loop here, which is just like clean anxiety, which just comes and it reaches a peak and it goes. But this other anxiety, this other wave here, is created when we start to resist the normal natural anxiety we get when we just have a little worrying thought. If we're not willing to be with the feelings and thoughts and sensations that arise, then it creates even more anxiety, which ACT calls dirty anxiety. And this anxiety just grows and grows and grows till eventually it spirals into a panic attack. Now, so in summary, if you understand this mechanism, how stress becomes distressing can be summarized in this very simple formula. You start off with clean anxiety, which is just like when you start to have a concern about something and just produces a wave of adrenaline passing to the system where you just feel your heart beating faster, may sweat a little bit more, and you may be feeling a bit anxious and a little bit afraid. But that will pass if we can just allow it to be there. But what happens is we've got into the habit, especially those of us who worry a lot and get stressed a lot, we've got into the habit almost automatically struggling and resisting the feelings of say for example, the increased heartbeat or the anxiety feelings. We keep struggling and fighting with it, almost on an unconscious level, because we've been doing it for so long. And then what happens is this creates the dirty anxiety that we're talking about. Now, there is a phrase in ACT which sort of summarizes this, and the phrase is, if you are not willing to have it, it gets worse. So if we are not willing to have anxiety feelings, and we start to resist them quite a lot, then over time, paradoxically, the anxiety gets worse and worse and worse. Another way of saying this is, what you resist persists and gets stronger. So the more we struggle and fight against the natural feelings that arise when we have a concern about something, the more we struggle to stop the anxiety feelings and the body sensations like the increased heartbeat, then again paradoxically, instead of the things getting better, the resistance and the struggle actually causes them to get worse. And this fundamentally is how anxiety spirals into a panic attack. If you spend a bit more time going back on the previous slides and actually understanding the mechanism of how panic attacks arise, you can see it's very, in a sense, very simple. It's basically because we have a very low tolerance of anxiety, and as soon as a little bit of anxiety pops up, we struggle so much inside to get rid of it that it starts to spiral into a panic attack. And fundamentally, what we're trying to do in the ACT model is to try to cultivate an attitude of non-resistance, or a willingness to allow feelings and body sensations to be there, even though they feel a little bit unpleasant. And there are many different exercises we call them acceptance exercises and diffusion exercises and mindfulness exercises, which if practiced on a regular basis over a period of time, and I would suggest at least a 2-month period, then gradually this automatic habit we have of struggling and resisting feelings slowly starts to weaken, and then we start to get what is called just clean anxiety. If you'd like to learn more about ACT and mindful living and download free stress management exercises, please visit my website